The prairie was quiet that afternoon, the kind of quiet that comes only after a storm has rolled through and left the land steaming under the merciless sun. The horizon stretched in every direction, endless, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Dust devils kicked up little whirlwinds on the trail, and the faint creak of a lonely windmill could be heard if you listened close enough. It was there, across that empty stretch of nowhere, that a rider appeared, slumped low in the saddle, swaying like a man already half dead. His horse was lathered, its chest heaving, eyes wide and panicked. Blood dripped from the rider's side, darkening the leather of his vest and falling in heavy drops that vanished into the thirsty earth. By the time he reached the old ranch house at the edge of the valley, the outlaw was barely conscious. He slid from the saddle, boots hitting the dirt in a clumsy stagger. His knees buckled, and he fell against a water barrel, the wood thudding as his weight struck it. His hand clutched his side, crimson spilling between his fingers. From the doorway of the ranch house, a figure stepped into the light. The rancher was broad-shouldered, his hair streaked with gray, his face carved deep with years of sun, wind, and hard work. His name was Daniel McGraw, though few bothered with formalities anymore. Folks around those parts just called him Mac. He looked down at the man bleeding in his yard, suspicion flickering across his weathered features. Bandits were no strangers to these plains, and more than once a bleeding stranger had been nothing but bait for an ambush. But Mac also saw the truth in the man's eyes, fear, desperation, and the kind of pain that no one could fake. "Don't move," Mac said, crouching beside him. "You'll tear it worse." The outlaw's breath rattled, his lips cracked with thirst. He met the rancher's gaze with a fire that hadn't yet gone out. "I ain't afraid of dying," he whispered before his eyes rolled back and the world went dark. Mac hauled the man inside, laying him across the wooden table. The outlaw's shirt was already soaked through, the wound in his side deep and angry. Mac fetched a basin of water, a rag, and the little box of medical supplies he kept for his own scrapes and bruises. He'd seen worse, out on cattle drives, during border skirmishes, even once in the war. But this was no ordinary wound. It was a gunshot, clean through, and by the look of the torn flesh, the bullet was still inside. As Mac worked, the outlaw stirred, groaning. His hands twitched, instinctively reaching for a gun that wasn't there. Mac had already spotted the revolver in the dirt outside, empty of bullets. "Save your strength," Mac muttered, dabbing at the wound. "You'll need it if you want to see another sunrise." The outlaw's eyes fluttered open again, glassy but sharp enough to search the room. Why help me?" he rasped. Mac didn't answer right away. He pressed the cloth against the bleeding and tied it tight with a strip of linen torn from an old shirt. Finally he spoke. "Because no man deserves to die alone in the dirt. Even if he's got the devil right in his back." The outlaw gave a weak laugh that turned into a cough. "The devil's been riding me a long time, stranger." By nightfall, the outlaw was still breathing, though every breath was shallow and pained. Mac sat by the fire, his rifle across his knees, staring into the flames. The prairie was quiet outside, but he could feel it. Trouble was coming. He hadn't missed the signs. The outlaw's horse was ridden near to death, the bullet wound fresh, the revolver empty. Someone had been chasing this man, and Mac reckoned they weren't far behind. Sure enough, as the moon climbed high, Mac spotted lanterns flickering on the horizon. A line of riders moved slow but steady across the ridge, their shadows long and sharp against the silver glow. Mac stood, his jaw tight. He had no love for outlaws, nor for the lawmen who hunted them with equal cruelty. But fate had dropped this broken man in his care, and he'd be damned if he let the prairie decide the rest. The outlaw woke again just before dawn, his skin pale, sweat running down his face. His voice was little more than a whisper, but Mac heard it clear as a bell in the stillness. "They'll come for me," the outlaw said. Don't let 'em take me alive." Mac leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Who are they?" The outlaw's lips curled in something between a sneer and a grimace of pain. "Marshall's men. Bounty hunters. Doesn't matter. They want the price on my head." Mac studied him. And what did you do to earn that price? The man closed his eyes. For a long moment, Mac thought he'd slipped back into unconsciousness. Then he spoke. Name's Eli Turner. I robbed banks. Stagecoaches. Took from men who'd take from me. But I never raised a gun on a woman, never killed a man who didn't draw first. Still, the law don't care. To them, I'm just another piece of meat to hang. Mac considered that. He'd known men like Eli before. Some were no-good killers. Others were just men born on the wrong side of fortune. Out here, the line between the two was thin as a rattler's tongue. You're safe here for now, Mac said finally. But come sunrise, you'd best be ready to tell me the whole truth. I don't shelter snakes unless I know they won't bite. The sunrise came blood-red, spilling across the horizon like fire. With it came the riders. Dust rose behind them as they fanned out, surrounding the ranch. There were 7 of them, hard-eyed men with rifles across their saddles. Mac stood on the porch, shotgun in hand, as the leader rode forward. He was a marshal by the look of his badge, though his eyes were colder than any lawman Mac had ever known. Morning, rancher, the marshal called. We're looking for a man. Name of Eli Turner. You seen him? Mac's jaw tightened. He could feel Eli's eyes on him from the shadow of the doorway. This was the choice: hand him over, or stand against the men who carried the law like a noose. He stumbled in here, half dead, Mac said slowly. Shot up and bleeding. If you're hunting him for justice, maybe you ought to think whether justice is the same as vengeance. The marshal's smile was thin. All I know is there's a price on his head. Dead or alive. Makes no difference to me which. Mac lifted the shotgun, leveling it steady. Then you best know this: you ain't taking him from my land while he still draws breath. The first shot rang out like thunder. The porch splintered as bullets tore into the wood. Mac dove behind a post, returning fire with both barrels of his shotgun. Eli, pale and weak, dragged himself to the window with Mac's spare rifle, firing in ragged bursts. The ranch erupted in chaos. Horses screamed, men shouted, and the air filled with the acrid stench of gunpowder. 4 hours it seemed, the fight raged on, the ranch holding fast against the tide of iron and fire. When the smoke cleared, 2 bounty hunters lay dead in the dirt, and the rest had fallen back to the ridge, regrouping. The marshal sat tall in the saddle, eyes burning with fury. You can't hold out forever, old man, he shouted. We'll starve you out. Burn you out. One way or another, he's coming with us. Mac reloaded, sweat dripping down his brow. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded like a war drum. He knew the marshal was right. Supplies were thin. Ammunition thinner. They couldn't last. Eli slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Blood soaked through his bandages again. But in his eyes, for the first time, there was something like peace. You should let me go, he said softly. They'll kill you for nothing. I ain't worth it. Mac looked at him, at the broken man fate had dropped in his yard. Then he shook his head. Every man's worth Savon, least once. The standoff lasted 3 long days. The marshal and his men circled like wolves, waiting for weakness. Inside, Mac and Eli fought their own battles, hunger, pain, and the ghosts of their pasts. On the 3rd night, as the fire burned low, Eli spoke again. Mac, if I don't make it, there's something I need you to know. There's money, hidden, from the banks I robbed. But it ain't mine. Not really. It was meant for my little sister back east. She don't know I lived this life. To her, I'm just a brother who went west for fortune. If I die here, promise me you'll see it gets to her. Mac's throat tightened. He nodded. I'll see it done. Eli managed a faint smile. Then maybe I won't die a sinner after all. Before dawn, Mac saddled the outlaw's horse, the only one still fit to ride. He helped Eli into the saddle, strapping him in tight. You ride east, Mac said. There's a canyon 2 miles from here. If you can make it through, you'll lose them in the rocks. Eli shook his head weakly. What about you? Mac loaded his rifle, jaw set. I'll hold them here. Buy you time. Eli's eyes burned with something like respect. You're a damn fool, Mac. Maybe, Mac said, slapping the horse's flank. But sometimes fools are the only ones who change a man's fate. The horse bolted into the rising sun, Eli clinging to the saddle. A shout went up from the ridge as the marshal's men spurred after him. Mac stepped into the yard, rifle raised, and let out a roar that echoed across the plains. The gunfight that followed was brutal and swift. Mac stood his ground, every shot buying Eli another heartbeat of freedom. The marshal himself charged forward, revolver blazing, until the two men stood face to face in the dirt. You'll die for him, rancher, the marshal spat. Mac leveled his rifle. Better men than you have tried. The final shot rang out, and the marshal fell. Weeks later, word spread across the territory. Some said the outlaw Eli Turner was dead, his body left in the canyon. Others swore they saw a rider heading east, wounded but alive. As for Mac, his ranch stood quiet, the scars of battle still visible in bullet holes and burned wood. He tended his cattle, mended his fences, and kept his promise. A letter was sent east, along with a small fortune, to a young woman who wept when she read her brother's name. And on quiet nights, under the endless stars, Mac would sit on his porch with his rifle across his knees, listening to the wind carry the whispers of the past. Because in the Wild West, every man's story ends the same, dust to dust, legend to legend. But some stories, carried on the wind, remind us that honor ain't dead yet.